Welcome to the Driving the World podcast series. I'm your host, Cully Holland. Today we have Austin Burdett, our industrial gearing product manager. We'll be discussing our cooling and sealing options. Hey, Austin, how you doing today?
Hey, doing good, man. Happy Friday to you, Coley.
Happy Friday. Thank you so much for joining us. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about our industrial gearing, our larger gearboxes, and specifically the cooling and sealing options. So let's just start off at the very top. What are they and kind of like why are they important? Why do we care so much and have so many options when it comes to industrial gearing?
Absolutely. Yeah, so it's interesting. These are relatively small parts for industrial gearboxes, right? Relatively inexpensive compared to the whole drive package, but they're very important. So both your cooling fan and also your seals play a huge role in the longevity of the gearbox. So let's just talk a bit about fans first.
Yeah.
Yeah, so fans, the type of fans we're talking about typically are integrated into the high-speed shaft because you want the fastest rotation, most airflow possible, right? So that's what a fan is. You kind of understand this concept intuitively of convective cooling. So like let's say you microwave something a bit too long, you take it out, get another plate, and then just use that as a fan to cool it down, right?
Yep.
Same principle with a large gearbox. Those suckers get hot, so you need a fan to cool them down sometimes. So that's fans, and then seals just keeps the oil in, and then any sort of dust or debris from the application out.
I mean, those are two things that are definitely important and might be overlooked if some of our listeners listen to a previous industrial gearing podcast. They know thermals are very, very important when it comes to these
Absolutely.
larger boxes. And just like we don't like oil leaks, we also want to keep dirt and contaminants out of our gearboxes. So that's some of the reasons we have a few more options when it comes to our sealing options. So why? We kind of covered that a little bit, but is there anything else we know about why these are important for our gearboxes or?
Sure. Actually, that's a great point. So I had an interesting conversation with our IG service manager, and he mentioned that about 50% of the field service cases when our IG field service specialists go out and inspect gearboxes, if there's some sort of an issue, 50% or more of the time it's due to bad seals of some kind, or also fans, like cooling not being sufficient. So it's a big deal.
Yeah, even those, like you said, these are relatively small or relatively more economical than the entire drive package. They're definitely crucial parts
Oh, for
when
sure.
we're coming down to it.
Yeah. Cheap insurance, right?
Oh,
With a
yeah.
fan on there.
And you talked about the fans being on the high speed shafts, normally the input shafts. But looking at the table, I see three different types of fans. So
Right.
are they all the same? Do they a little different? What are some pros to the different types of fans we have?
Sure, absolutely. Great question. So, as you said, those are the viewers that can actually see the video and not just hear the audio. I love show and tell, so I had to bring a bunch of IG parts, right?
Oh, yeah.
All right, so first to start off with, teach you the different types of fans. We have a simple radial fan.
All right. So I'm looking at a radial fan right now.
Yes, exactly. So, if you can see, and I'll try to describe it for you over the audio, is that the fan blades are what we'll call straight. So they're not at an angle of
Yep.
some kind. So in the name of the fan, radial, it just means it's throwing air outward radially from the high-speed shaft. So it's not inline or axial, which we'll show in just a second. It's not an axial fan. So it's not quite as efficient of a fan. So the volumetric flow of the air is not as high. Therefore, your convective cooling is not quite as great. But it's still a very great economical option for gearbox cooling.
All right, fantastic. So we covered our radial fan. What else are we looking at here? What are our
Sure.
other fan type?
Totally. So I think the next logical progression would probably be a variant of the radial fan, which
Okay.
is called a diagonal fan.
All
So
right.
you can see here, if you have video, that the fan blades are still straight or perpendicular to that high-speed shaft, but you have a bit of a cone shape here.
Right.
So what that does is, so let's say that the motor is actually pointing upwards to the sky in this case, right? So anything that's close, like a big disc brake or maybe a fluid coupling that's very close to the input end of the gearbox would actually choke the airflow of a standard radial fan or axial fan. So instead we have this diagonal fan that diagonally will pull air kind of around that big coupling or big brake.
Gotcha. So it definitely has its place in the portfolio. And I'm sure our IG specialists, some of our sales folk will know when to use it in the complete drive package.
Exactly.
And you briefly mentioned, but let's talk about our axial fan over here.
Of course, my personal favorite. So you'll recognize this from just like a classic desk fan or something, or box fan. So this is your axial fan. The biggest difference that stands out are the fan blades. So they're actually angled a little bit. So still perpendicular to the high-speed shaft, but they're rotated as well. So what that allows the fan to do is actually pull and push air axially along the shaft. So it's not just throwing the air out, it's a bit more directed, and it's more efficient as well. So higher volumetric flow rate of air.
And just to mention, something we should know is that those do have a preferred direction to actually operate properly. So while you do get the best airflow, you have to be aware of your rotation of direction to make sure they're operating properly.
Yes, that's an excellent point, man. I'm glad you brought that up because that is very key. So if you have a backstop on your unit, you should only be operating it in one direction anyway. So axial fan's a great option. If you have a reversing application, probably a bad idea.
Probably going to go with a radial or one of our diagonal fans over here.
Exactly. Excellent point.
So I think that touches on all the fans I can see and is a nice little 101 on some of the industrial gearing fans we have. So let's move into the sealing, because you said over 50% of the service cases we see are either cooling or sealing. So let's talk on some of the sealings, maybe start with the most basic seal we have and then work our way up to some of our more complex and or intricate solutions we have.
Sure, totally. So that seal on top right there, the black one, so that's just a standard single lip seal, pretty basic. So there's different types of seals, and there's also different materials of the seals as well. So we have to spec them in both correctly for the application. So that one that you picked up there is an NBR or nitrile seal, really great for colder temperatures.
Okay.
So the material is good for that. Not as great for high speed, so maybe like an input shaft, in the US with 60 hertz, 4-pole motors, you've got 1800 RPM. That's fairly screaming, right?
Right.
For rotational speed. So probably not the best choice for an input seal. Could be, maybe. Maybe in the colder temps it would be. And then right below that, you have more of a brown color, and that's the FKM Viton seal.
Okay.
Is the trade name for it. So that's better for the higher speeds, and also better for higher temperatures as well. And then you see it's actually physically bigger. It's like just two of the single seals, but just combined. So you get a little more dust protection there.
Well, that's good. And I mean, I can see colder temperatures. Definitely some of our applications are finding those. And then, of course, we find the hotter temperatures as well. And especially some of the applications generate the heat that require that second seal we spoke about. So those are two seals hopefully a lot of our listeners are familiar with. Let's maybe branch into one that some of our listeners might not be too familiar at, and that's this larger specimen, if you're watching, that's say right in the middle of the table. So why don't you just describe that for our listeners and maybe some of the benefits of what we're looking at.
Sure. Yeah, this is the big boy, right? This thing's about 40 pounds, kind of a smaller one. So it's actually machined out of metal. So we bolt what we call the seal cover onto the actual housing of the unit. And then we have just this like sealing disc that goes on top. And then once you put those two machine surfaces together, they form a labyrinth. So that is the name of this seal type, is a labyrinth seal. So it actually uses grease between the two machine surfaces and then the labyrinth that's created there to purge out any impurities and keep things from getting in. So very interesting sealing type. I would say it's probably our premium sealing type and a really excellent choice in any sort of dusty environment, maybe cement industry stuff or grain, for example.
For sure, because I mean, you mentioned it, and it's purgeable, so you can re-grease it. And as you mentioned at the beginning, we're trying to keep the lubricant in the gearbox, but we're also trying to keep the contaminants out. So having the ability to actually purge that grease and get new clean grease to trap any possible contaminants is a huge benefit for some of our more corrosive or dirty environments where they sit in.
Exactly.
So I think we covered most of our seals, or the most common sealing types that we have. Is there anything else our listeners should be aware of when it's coming to our fan cooling and or the seals that we have available in our industrial gearing portfolio?
I think that's good for me. I guess the last thing I'll add is just please reach out to our application engineers with IG or any part of our company, and we're happy to help answer any questions you might have.
Fantastic. Well, awesome. Really appreciate the time and hope to see you soon.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it, Coley.